What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Bretto, and today we're here to talk about the safety position for the Green Bay Packers, specifically that second spot next to Darnell Savage, because from LaFleur's press conference on Thursday, it does sound like, at the very least, there's a front runner for that spot next to Darnell Savage, and so we're going to talk about who that is and why that might be. But first, follow me on Twitter at Paul_Bretto. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. And you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So now back to the safety position. As we know, this has been one of the bigger, if not the biggest, positional battle taking place this summer for the Green Bay Packers. Going back to offseason programs, we knew that Darnell Savage, through his ups and downs, was going to be the starting safety in this Packers defense. The big question was who was going to be starting next to him. Now, the Packers didn't make any big additions at the safety position in the offseason, but they did make a number of additions. They re-signed Dallin Leavitt. They re-signed Rudy Ford. They brought in Tavarius Moore. They brought in Jonathan Owens. They drafted Anthony Johnson. They brought in a number of players at this position group. That's five right there to compete for that job, like I said, alongside Savage. And so far, what we've seen is a heavy rotation. Throughout offseason programs, it was Rudy Ford. The start of training camp, it was Rudy Ford. Then there was about a week and a half, even two-ish week stretch where we saw a lot of Jonathan Owens in that starting spot next to Savage. And we've also seen Tavarius Moore getting some reps there, Anthony Johnson getting some reps as well. And as recently as a week ago, Brian Gutekunst said that nobody had really stood out in that competition in terms of separating themselves from the others, or at least doing so consistently enough that they felt confident about saying, this particular player is going to be one of the starters. However, since those comments, Rudy Ford has been back in the mix, or has been, not in the mix, he has been one of the starting safeties alongside Savage. And when asked about the safety position as a whole on Thursday during his pre-practice press conference, Matt LaFleur said that they have a pretty good indication of who's going to be in that starting spot. A follow-up question then came through specifically about Rudy Ford in that spot next to Savage, alluding to him being the one who's going to be in that starting role. And Matt LaFleur said that Rudy Ford has done a nice job. He's going out there and executing his responsibility. He's being physical and trusting what he's seeing and playing fast. Added again, he's done a really nice job. I've said all along, it has made perfect sense that Ford was going to be the starter next to Savage. And I'll add this caveat too, since LaFleur did. Things can still change. There was another practice that took place on Thursday. There's a preseason game left. There's obviously going to be practices leading up to week one. But as of now, all signs do point to Rudy Ford being that starting safety, or at the very least, the front runner for that role. It sounds like he has separated himself. And as I was saying, that's not surprising in the least. Out of the safeties at this position right now, not named Savage, he has the most experience in Joe Barry's defense. Granted, it's not a huge amount, but I just listed off all the players all the new players who were brought in. And of course, Dallin Leavitt is primarily a special teams player. On top of that, when called upon last season, during the second half of the year, Rudy Ford gave this defense at the safety position what it needed: stability. Gave them reliability. He proved to be a willing tackler, a capable run defender. Out of all safeties last season, he ranked 19th in Pro Football Focus's run stop rate metric, which takes into account limiting the offense in the run game. And so he's proven that capability, and we all know that that's an important part of the Joe Barry defense at the safety position. It's a key responsibility. This defense plays with a ton of light boxes, and so it's up to the safeties to really play a vital role in the run game, being good at tackling, filling gaps, being able to take on blockers so other can make plays. All of those are key responsibilities that they have to have. And again, Rudy Ford proved to be capable in that capacity. From a coverage standpoint, and I know this sounds very simplified, but he did his job. He did what was asked of him. He was positioned well, and that resulted in 4 takeaways. He had 3 interceptions and a fumble recovery last season. And like I said, that sounds simple, but that was an aspect that was missing at the safety position last season. And it's a big reason why we saw so many coverage breakdowns and big plays for the offense, miscommunications. And one other part of Ford's game that LaFleur mentioned that I'll point out here again, that where he's really stood out is with his communication pre-snap at the safety position. That's another key aspect of playing that role in any defense, is getting everyone aligned correctly and identifying what the offense is doing or who's positioned where. And so that's been an aspect that he's been able to stand out with as well. So again, all signs right now point to Rudy Ford being the Packers starting safety, and for all the reasons I just laid out, it makes perfect sense, especially given what we've seen so far this preseason. Jonathan Owens has made some plays. He had that pass breakup on an RPO against New England, made another play at the line of scrimmage, but we've also seen a missed tackle. Again, small sample size. He was a part of a 32-yard completion that the Bengals completed during that first preseason game. So ultimately, of course you want to see playmaking from all your position groups, but really what the Packers are looking for at safety is consistency. And this is something that Joe Barry's talked about since OTAs because of just how volatile this position group was last season. They just want someone who's going to be consistent from day to day, from down to down, go out there, know what their responsibility is, and be able to execute on it. And again, Rudy Ford might not be the flashiest player, but during his time with the Packers, when put into those situations on defense, he has provided some stability. Now, one other thing that Matt LaFleur has added is that this is going to be very fluid. If Rudy Ford does in fact end up as the starter week 1, that doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be the starter week 2. His in-game performance is going to matter. What takes place during practices throughout the week are going to be a part of the equation. And Matt LaFleur said he hopes that the competition level stays high. And this wasn't just about the safety position, but in general, he wants the competition level throughout the team to stay high so that guys are continually pushing each other and hopefully making each other better. So again, Rudy Ford, it definitely appears to be his job right now. In terms of the other safeties on the roster, Tavarius Moore, he suffered a knee injury during the New England game. Matt LaFleur said earlier this week, that he's day-to-day right now. Anthony Johnson left Wednesday's practice with a knee injury. Did not practice on Thursday, but again, we were told that that's a minor knee injury, so hopefully shouldn't keep him sidelined very long. And then, like I mentioned with Dallin Leavitt, he's on this team to be a core special teams player. So even from that aspect, the numbers and some injuries taking place, it's whittled down this safety competition to a degree, especially over the last week. Now, speaking of safety, I'm going to parlay this into one other quick conversation about Innis Gaines. Innis Gaines is listed as a safety, but he has spent pretty much all the training camp and even the last 3 games of last season for 30-plus snaps playing out of the slot. And he just returned from injury this past week. He suffered a quad injury prior to the Bengals game, so he's missed a decent chunk of training camp so far. But he's been thrown right back into the mix. He's back out there with the second-team defense, which is where he's been all offseason. He's been thrown back out there on special teams. And for all the players I just mentioned at the safety position, his path to the roster is really a crowded one. I mean, there's Darnell Savage, Rudy Ford, Jonathan Owens, Dallin Leavitt, Anthony Johnson, Tavarius Moore. I mean, that's 6 players right there, and I haven't even mentioned Innis Gaines. From a roster construction standpoint, it's really difficult to envision the Packers keeping more than 5 safeties. The last time they did keep 6 was in 2016, and even if they were going to keep 6, who is Innis Gaines going to leapfrog within the players I just mentioned? Perhaps they choose to roster him as a cornerback, which would make more sense given that's where he is playing. He's a slot cornerback, backing up Keyshawn Nixon. But his path to contributing this team is evident. He was a core special teams player, has been for all of the summer as well when healthy and on the field. And again, as a nickel cornerback, as talented as this Packers cornerback room is, they do not have a ton of nickel cornerback options. Rasul Douglas, Carrington Valentine, Eric Stokes, Corey Ballantyne, who's fighting for a roster spot. I mean, those guys are all boundary cornerbacks. That's where they're at their best. Keyshawn Nixon, of course, is in the slot. And then you got Jair, who he's someone you just want playing all over the place. You don't necessarily want to pigeonhole him to, all right, you're a slot guy or you're a boundary guy. Ideally, you want him moving around just wherever the opponent's best receiver is. So Gaines could also provide some defensive value in that regard in being a backup to Keyshawn Nixon, again, which the Packers don't have a ton of options, again, when it comes to true slot cornerbacks. He has that ability, has special teams ability. And like I mentioned, he's very versatile. He's listed as a safety. He's taken snaps at safety, not so much this summer, but he's been with the Packers for a few years in practices on the practice squad and has been asked to fill that role. So if they ever did end up in a pinch, they have someone else that they could potentially lean on. That's his path to the roster. This variety of roles that he can be asked to fill, including a key one on special teams and a potential key backup in the slot if ever needed to be called upon. But again, I'll reiterate, where does he fit on the roster? It's a crowded safety room. At cornerback right now, we know there are 4 roster locks: Valentine, Nixon, Douglas, and Alexander. Eric Stokes is eventually going to be back. Right now he's on the PUP list, and if he starts the season on the PUP list, he does not count towards a roster spot, which perhaps could be Gaines' path to making this team on the final 53, being that 5th cornerback. But then again, eventually Stokes is going to come back, and do they keep 6 cornerbacks, which isn't out of the question by any means. We've seen them do it before, but for, I believe, most of last season, if not all of it, they kept just 5. And if you keep a 6th cornerback, you're making a cut elsewhere. So which player are you going to release at that point? Which position are you going to take away from? All factors that are going to come in, down into this decision. But given Gaines just being thrown right back into the mix, just how many snaps he's seeing on defense, on special teams this week, I just get the impression that they're taking a very long and hard look at him right now in terms of determining, can he be someone who makes this final roster? And his playing time in Saturday's game, along with Corey Ballantyne's, I think is going to be very telling in terms of how hard of a look they're truly taking. So there you have it. I appreciate you guys tuning in. There's my quick rundown, quick breakdown of what's taking place at the safety position, where I know there are a number of questions. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. You can find all my work over at Packers Wire. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the channel. I greatly appreciate it. And until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack, go.